Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Ethnographic Methods in Discourse Analysis. Ethnographic methods in discourse analysis involve the combination of ethnography, an immersive, context-based research approach, with discourse analysis, which examines how language shapes and reflects social realities. Ethnography focuses on understanding the cultural, social, and institutional contexts in which language is used, while discourse analysis pays close attention to how language creates meaning, establishes identities, and maintains power dynamics. When combined, ethnographic methods in discourse analysis allow researchers to explore how language functions within real-world social interactions, institutions, and cultural practices. Using ethnographic methods in discourse analysis allows for a deep understanding of language use within specific communities or settings. This approach emphasizes participant observation, interviews, and detailed contextual understanding, alongside analysis of how discourse is produced, interpreted, and circulated within a given social environment. 1. Key elements of ethnographic methods in discourse analysis. Participant observation. Immersing in the social setting. Participant observation is a core ethnographic method where the researcher actively engages in the social environment they are studying, observing language use as it occurs naturally in various social contexts. This approach allows the researcher to understand how language is intertwined with everyday activities, rituals, power structures, and cultural norms. Active engagement. Researchers may take part in the daily activities of the community or organization they are studying, enabling them to observe how language is used in real time and in context. Observational insights. By closely observing conversations, rituals, and interactions, researchers gain insights into how discourse functions in practice, including the nuances of tone, body language, and unspoken rules of communication. Example: a researcher studying the use of language in a healthcare setting might spend time in a hospital, observing interactions between doctors, nurses, and patients. By participating in the daily routines of the hospital staff, the researcher can observe how medical discourse is shaped by institutional hierarchies and how different forms of communication, e.g., technical jargon, lay language, are employed depending on the audience. Interviews and ethnographic conversations. Gathering data through direct interaction. Ethnographic methods often involve conducting interviews or engaging in informal conversations with participants to explore their perspectives, experiences, and interpretations of discourse. Interviews help the researcher understand how individuals see their own language use and the meanings they attach to their words. Semi-structured interviews. These interviews allow flexibility, enabling the researcher to ask open-ended questions while adapting to the flow of the conversation. This format provides rich qualitative data about how participants perceive and experience discourse. Ethnographic conversations. These are less formal and more natural than interviews, occurring spontaneously during fieldwork. Such conversations can reveal insights into language use in a more relaxed, unguarded setting. Example: in a study of workplace communication, a researcher might interview employees to ask about their experiences with different communication styles in the office. Employees might describe how they tailor their language depending on whether they are speaking to colleagues, managers, or clients. This data provides insight into the social norms and power dynamics that shape workplace discourse. Contextualized data collection. Understanding language in its social and cultural context. Ethnographic methods emphasize the importance of context in understanding language use. Researchers using ethnographic approaches in discourse analysis pay close attention to the cultural, social, historical, and institutional contexts in which discourse is produced and interpreted. Situational context. Understanding the immediate social environment and dynamics, such as who the participants are, their roles, relationships, and the specific setting in which the discourse occurs. Cultural context. considering how broader cultural norms, values, and practices influence language use. This can include traditions, social hierarchies, and shared understandings within a particular group. Example: in an ethnographic study of religious discourse, a researcher might examine how language is used in religious rituals, such as sermons or prayer meetings. The language used in these settings is shaped by both the situational context, e.g., the interaction between religious leaders and followers, and the broader cultural context, including religious doctrine, traditions, and community values. Thick description. Providing detailed, context-rich data. A key ethnographic practice is thick description, which involves providing rich, detailed accounts of social interactions, including the cultural, social, and emotional context in which they occur. Thick description goes beyond mere observation by interpreting the meaning of actions and language within a broader social and cultural framework. Descriptive and interpretive layers. Thick description includes not only a detailed account of what happens, e.g., a conversation or ritual, but also an interpretation of the underlying meanings, norms, and power structures that shape the interaction. Example: in a study of school interactions, a thick description might include not just a transcript of a classroom discussion, but also details about the teacher's body language, the students' reactions, the seating arrangement, and the cultural expectations regarding authority and learning. This helps to interpret how discourse functions to maintain the teacher's authority and influence the learning environment. Discourse in practice. Analyzing language as social action. Ethnographic methods in discourse analysis view language as a form of social practice that does more than convey information. It performs social functions, creates relationships, and reinforces or challenges power structures. Researchers analyze how discourse is used in specific situations to achieve social goals, such as persuasion, negotiation, or identity construction. Language as action. Discourse is seen as a tool that people use to navigate social relationships, assert identity, or negotiate power dynamics. The ethnographic approach emphasizes how language is used in context to achieve specific outcomes or maintain social order. Social functions of language. By observing how people use language in everyday life, ethnographers analyze the ways discourse sustains or challenges norms, rules, and hierarchies. Example: in an ethnographic study of political discourse, the researcher might observe campaign rallies, interviews, or debates, analyzing how politicians use language to align themselves with certain values, persuade voters, or create a sense of national identity. The discourse is seen as more than just rhetoric. It is a tool for social action and influence. Reflexivity and positionality. Reflecting on the researcher's role. Ethnographic methods in discourse analysis require researchers to practice reflexivity, meaning they must critically reflect on their own position, biases, and influence on the research process. Understanding how the researcher's identity, e.g., race, gender, class, and role, e.g., outsider or insider, affect the interactions they observe and the interpretations they make is crucial to producing ethical, nuanced analysis. Researcher influence. Researchers must acknowledge how their presence may influence the behavior of participants or the data collected. Critical reflexivity. This involves ongoing self-examination of how the researcher's own background, assumptions, and relationship to the community shape the analysis. Example: a researcher studying discourse in an indigenous community may need to reflect on their status as an outsider, considering how their background, e.g., as a non-member of the community, affects the dynamics of their interactions with participants. Reflexivity helps the researcher remain aware of potential biases and ensures that their interpretations of the discourse are sensitive to the community's cultural context. Analyzing multimodal discourse. Understanding language beyond words. In ethnographic discourse analysis, researchers often examine multimodal discourse, which includes not just spoken or written language but also other forms of communication such as gestures, visual symbols, spatial arrangements, and body language. These nonverbal elements of communication are critical to understanding how meaning is created in context. Nonverbal communication. Researchers may observe how gestures, facial expressions, or physical space complement or contradict spoken language. Cultural artifacts and symbols. Ethnographers might analyze how symbols, images, or objects are used in communication, particularly in settings like religious rituals, ceremonies, or political events. Example: in a study of courtroom discourse, the researcher might analyze not only the language used by lawyers and judges but also how nonverbal elements like eye contact, gestures, and the physical arrangement of the courtroom contribute to the power dynamics of the legal process. Point 2. Examples of ethnographic methods in discourse analysis. Example 1. Ethnographic study of medical discourse. Context: a hospital setting where doctors, nurses, and patients interact. Method: a researcher might use participant observation to observe interactions between healthcare providers and patients, paying attention to how medical jargon is used and how doctors explain diagnoses or treatments in lay terms for patients. They could also conduct interviews with healthcare workers and patients to explore their perspectives on communication challenges. By contextualizing the use of language within the institutional hierarchy and the urgency of medical decisions, the researcher can analyze how power dynamics influence communication in medical settings. Thick description example: the researcher might describe how a doctor's tone changes when speaking to colleagues compared to patients, reflecting different levels of authority and technical knowledge, providing a detailed, context-rich account of how discourse functions in a hospital. Example 2. Ethnographic study of educational discourse. Context: a classroom in a public school. Method: through participant observation and interviews with teachers and students, a researcher might examine how classroom discourse reinforces or challenges authority and social norms. The researcher could focus on how teachers use questioning techniques to maintain control or encourage participation and how students respond through body language, tone, and silence. Ethnographic conversations with students could reveal how they perceive the teacher's communication style and its impact on their learning experience. Multimodal analysis example: the researcher might note how students' seating arrangement reflects their engagement or disengagement, and how the teacher's gestures and tone reinforce their authority in the classroom. Example 3. Ethnographic study of workplace discourse. Context: a corporate office setting. Method: by conducting ethnographic fieldwork in a corporate office, a researcher could observe how language is used in formal and informal settings, such as meetings, emails, and water cooler conversations. Interviews with employees might reveal how they navigate hierarchical structures through language, such as how junior employees use polite or deferential language when communicating with supervisors, while managers may use more direct, assertive language. The researcher might also examine how the corporate culture is reflected in the use of business jargon or acronyms. Reflexivity example: the researcher may reflect on how their role as an external observer impacts employees' behavior, noting if employees act more formally in their presence and how this might affect the data collected. Conclusion: ethnographic methods in discourse analysis allow researchers to study language in its natural, real-world context, offering rich insights into how discourse operates within specific social, cultural, and institutional settings. By combining participant observation, interviews, contextual analysis, thick description, and reflexivity, ethnographers gain a deeper understanding of how language is used to perform social actions, maintain power structures, and shape identities. This approach emphasizes the importance of understanding language as both a product and a reflection of the broader social world in which it occurs. Frequently asked questions. What are ethnographic methods in discourse analysis? Ethnographic methods in discourse analysis combine immersive ethnography with the analysis of language. This approach studies how language functions in its social, cultural, and institutional context, helping researchers understand the meanings, identities, and power dynamics embedded in communication. How does participant observation contribute to discourse analysis? Participant observation involves the researcher actively engaging in the community or setting they are studying. This method allows for real-time observation of how language is used in social interactions, revealing the contextual and unspoken norms governing communication. What role do interviews play in ethnographic discourse analysis? Interviews help gather participants' perspectives on their language use, offering deeper insights into how they interpret and experience discourse. Semi-structured interviews and ethnographic conversations allow for flexibility in exploring how individuals relate to language in different contexts. Why is context important in ethnographic discourse analysis? Understanding the social, cultural, historical, and institutional context is crucial in ethnographic discourse analysis. Context shapes how discourse is produced, interpreted, and circulated, influencing everything from power dynamics to cultural norms in communication. What is thick description in ethnographic research? Thick description provides rich, detailed accounts of social interactions, including the cultural and social context. It goes beyond observation by interpreting the meanings and norms underlying communication, offering a comprehensive understanding of language in use. How is language viewed as social action in ethnographic discourse analysis? Ethnographic methods treat language as a tool for performing social functions, such as asserting identity, negotiating power, or maintaining relationships. Researchers analyze how discourse is used to achieve social goals in specific settings. What is reflexivity in ethnographic discourse analysis? Reflexivity involves researchers critically reflecting on their own position, biases, and influence on the research process. Understanding how the researcher's identity and role affect interactions helps ensure ethical and accurate interpretations of discourse. How does ethnographic discourse analysis handle nonverbal communication? Ethnographic discourse analysis often includes multimodal analysis, examining not just language but also gestures, body language, and symbols. These nonverbal elements are essential for understanding the full meaning of communication in context. Can you give an example of ethnographic methods in a workplace setting? In a corporate office study, a researcher might observe meetings and conduct interviews with employees to understand how language reflects hierarchical structures. They may analyze formal communication like emails and informal interactions to see how power and authority are negotiated through language. What are the benefits of using ethnographic methods in discourse analysis? Ethnographic methods provide a deep, context-rich understanding of how language operates in real-world settings. This approach offers nuanced insights into social practices, power relations, and identity construction, making it particularly valuable for studying complex social phenomena.